From mastering the art of saving to harnessing the power of investments, we cover it all. But it's not just about the money. It's about cultivating a millionaire mindset that propels you towards success in every aspect of your life. Join our community of ambitious go-getters and discover the secrets to becoming a millionaire by morning. Subscribe now to Millionaire by Morning on your favorite podcast platform. And let's make your financial dreams a reality. Millionaire by Morning, where money mindset, motivation, and mastery meet. Subscribe today and unlock your path to prosperity.
Hello, hello, hello out there. Once again, welcome to the Millionaire by Morning podcast. We have a guest with us today who's going to speak about a very interesting topic. His name is Kam Knight. He is a coach, international speaker, and best-selling author of a dozen books in the area of mental, emotional, and physical performance. He is known for bringing fresh solutions and insights that are rare departure from traditional ideas. Because of these fresh perspectives, his books have become the gold standard for their respective topics, which have helped over 500,000 people. When he is not coaching or writing, he is traveling, having traveled to over 100 countries around the world. Welcome to the Millionaire by Morning podcast, Cam.
Hey, thank you very much, Rashad. I am really happy to be here and thanks for having me.
Oh, awesome, man. Thank you for spending your time with us tonight. I normally on this show, because I believe that it's very important to start at the very beginning. And I guess with you, you know, how did you know at this point you're an entrepreneur? Entrepreneur. I don't know, if you had to go through, leaps and bounds, or if this is just something that you started out doing and it was just in you, or maybe it was your parents' passion as well. How did it begin with you?
You mean my entrepreneurship journey?
Yes.
Okay, that's a interesting question. So, when I moved to the US, more or less, we grew up just as poor as when moving here. Probably even more because at least where I came from, relatively we were doing better. And because we grew up poor, I didn't have a lot. And my parents weren't really around. So it was a really big culture shock from the part of the world that I'm from. And I didn't really know like what was going on. It's like a whole different world. And since my parents weren't around, I turned to the best thing I knew to understand what was going on, and that was television. And then unfortunately, I grew up on television. And watching television, what I saw was people having all these things, having all these experiences. I would see a commercial for Disneyland, and I thought everybody got to go except for me. I would see a commercial for a nice car or a TV show with, your typical family having their trials and tribulations, thinking I was the only one not having that. And so from a young age, I was kind of driven and wanted to do more and have more. Unfortunately, those resources weren't available. And I remember in the sixth grade, a friend and I decided we were going to figure out a way to make some money. So we decided we were going to sell seeds. So we bought a bunch of seeds to go sell. And then in the seventh grade, there was a to go shop that kind of opened up on my house. And the owner approached me to hand out flyers. And so I did that. And then as I kind of grew a little bit older, there was this game that became really popular amongst the, let's say, not so cool kids. of school, and that was called Magic the Gathering. It's a card game that was similar to Dungeons and Dragons that had become popular in the past. And so some of these cards had value. And in some respects, I kind of became a hustler. I would be trading different cards, getting the ones that have more value, selling and making money off of it. And, you know, and then not decided, I ended up going to college. It did help me pay for part of college. And I didn't know what to study, so I studied business. From business, I graduated, became an accountant. I did fairly well as an accountant, especially considering where I was coming from. And I was making the kind of money that I never really imagined having. And I'm not saying it was huge, but for my standards, it was very comfortable. Though I would look around to see the people who were doing extremely well because I worked really hard in school to get into a good college. And then I worked really hard in college to sit for the CPA. And I worked really hard in the CPA to become an accountant and doing a 9 to 5 or even more. But then I saw people who were doing considerably better in endeavors such as real estate or being an entrepreneur or going about doing their own thing. And I was like a sucker. I'm doing the corporate job, making X amount of dollars, where entrepreneurs have a much more unlimited potential. So I wanted to move into that route. And around that time, I had an itch to write. It was an overpowering itch, one I couldn't resist. I didn't know where this itch came from because I wasn't a writer. I didn't like writing. I wasn't good at writing. And in school, I did considerably better in math. In fact, I was in math classes that were above my grade level, but the opposite in English and anything related to writing. So I don't know where this witch itch came from, but I couldn't resist it, so I followed it. And so I started writing. My goal was to write a book and make millions off of it. That was just this inspiration I had. And I ended up spending the first couple of years writing because I had such poor beliefs and like resistance that this could actually happen, that I would be successful, people might laugh at me, things of that nature, that unconsciously I was slowing my progress more than it needed to be. And then luckily, self publishing kind of came into the forefront. Amazon introduced a Kindle and allowed people to publish ebooks on their platform. And the initial book I wrote, I wasn't too confident in it. So I took some of the chapters and broke them into their own mini books. And I threw them up on Kindle just to see what would happen. And surprisingly, it didn't do too bad. And I got some feedback, which reinforced that I had something worthwhile to say and people wanted to hear it. And from that, I have now written over a dozen books. I have moved into talking about a concept that I call internal resistance, which answers a question I had my whole life, and that is, why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it. So I've been kind of talking about that and bringing this concept out into the forefront because what I'm noticing is that a lot of people resonate with it as well as struggle with it. And since then, I've taken it up a notch and I've also developed a technique that helps, or I'll backtrack and say it breaks the barrier between our conscious and unconscious mind to go into our unconscious to work on our challenges and blocks at an unconscious level where more of the power is at in influencing our day-to-day thinking as well as decisions. And I want to preface by saying it's not hypnosis or NLP, it's something unique I've developed. So that's how I've kind of come here from where I was. Hopefully, this was a pretty good preface in that it didn't ramble too much.
No, no, you did not.
Okay.
You actually set us up perfectly.
Awesome. Awesome.
So, internal resistance,
Yeah.
is that the same thing? I guess we'll just start with the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Would that be considered the same thing as procrastination?
In some respects, yes, because procrastination and sabotage are a manifestation of internal resistance. So, a lot of times when we're procrastinating, we know we should be doing something, but we're not. And because we're not, we start to assume that it's because we're lazy, we don't have what it takes, we don't have discipline, or any of the things that people told us when we were procrastinating. But there's actually a lot more going on. And that is our brain has decided what we have chosen to do isn't something that it wants to do and is putting the brakes on that decision. And instead of telling us it's putting the brakes, it's manifesting in what I call tricks of resistance, or in other ways, and procrastination is one of them. And to really understand resistance, I'm going to kind of set the background or the stage, if you will, for what resistance is and how it works. So, I want people to understand that the part of the brain that creates wants and desires works separate from the part that actually allows us to act on the desire. Very crucial to understand this, so I will repeat it. The part of the brain that creates wants works independent of the part that actually gives a green light to act on the want. So we have one part of the brain which is creating wants, and it was never meant to see if that want is achievable, fulfilling, safe, and so on. Its only job is to create wants. And in many ways, it's cranking out wants and desires day in and day out at a pace faster than most of us can achieve. And so we have this other part of the brain that checks to see if that want or desire is achievable, fulfilling, safe, and so on. So anytime we do have a want, this part of the brain analyzes it to see if it is safe or worth doing. Now, what's really key to understand about this is that it is possible for both the brain to create a want for something and at the same time hold us back from it. So I know many listeners here, including yourself, Rashad, have experienced moments where you're kind of, excuse me, I got a drink of water. This will be cut out, right?
Yes.
Perfect. So I know many listeners, including yourself, have experienced moments where, like, you want to do this thing, but you're in a way you're feeling pulled back, or there's this kind of tug of war going on. Well, it's because of this dynamic at play. In fact, for much of my journey, especially learning this topic, I used to think whoever created humanity, whether it was God, aliens, or evolution, must have been very evil, because how could they do this to us? How could this create this desire in us and at the same time hold us back from it and have to deal with the pain of it? Well, when you look at it from this perspective, it makes much more sense. And so, anytime a desire does come up, it resistance analyzes it using a whole host of criteria. And if that desire, decision, or course of action is not in line with any of these criterias, it will prevent action. So it helps to think about standing before a panel of judges or board of directors. Every decision that comes up must go through them. And even if one of the members is against the idea, it will not pass. And so now that we kind of understand what's going on, when we do want to do something and resistance looks at that want using the criteria and says, oh no, it's not in line with some of these criteria, so I can't let you do it, we find ourselves more or less procrastinating or unable to do that thing, or it requires quite a bit of effort to actually do it. And oftentimes, the closer we get to the finish line, the more resistance comes in trying to hold us back. And in many ways, it can feel like Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Every action we take, resistance is there, creating an opposing force to hold us back. And I'm confident many people actually know what that feels like, where they're trying to do something and it's like this force is holding them back or they're hitting up against this invisible wall.
Good. That's good. That's good. So, with the analogy of board members, let's say there's five board members, and four of them agree and one do not. How do you
Yeah.
get past that one blockage?
Yeah.
How does a person get past that one blockage?
So oftentimes when I talk about what I do and I talk about that I discuss resistance, one of the first questions that I get asked is, well, how does someone get over the resistance? And this is one of those questions that helps to ask later down the line because it actually is more important to understand what the criteria are and why they are there. And more importantly, usually, if there is a particular criteria that's holding us back, we have to work on overcoming that criteria. When it comes to the human mind and body, there are no cookie cutter solutions. I know a lot of times people will come across a tip and technique and they see someone applying it and getting good results. But then when they apply it, they may not get the same or equal results and then feel like, oh, it doesn't work for them or the world is against them. The reality is, the reason that tip or solution worked for that other person is because it was addressing their specific resistance. And the reason it may not have worked for them is because they had a different resistance or they had multiple resistance. So they likely had three of the criteria holding them back. And that tip or solution worked on one of them, but now they have a couple underneath that it will help to work through. And I think it might be helpful to understand what some of these criteria are, just so people can kind of get a frame of reference. One of the most important criteria come down to belief. If a person believes something is not possible, of course, the brain is not going to have them do it. Though there's more to beliefs than just thinking something is possible, because a person can think something is possible, but not believe that it's possible for them. And that belief is something that lives deep down in us that we may not even be aware of. So we may see somebody doing or having something, and it might stimulate our wanting mechanism to do and have it as well. And because we see someone doing it, we do believe it's possible. And then when we go after it, that deep down belief that it's not possible for us can create resistance and hold us back from starting. Or if we do start, make progress slow. And if we are making progress, make it difficult, or if we're getting to the finish line, cause us to sabotage us. So this is one of the criterias. Another criteria has to do with habits. In order for something to become comfortable and easy, we need to build a muscle for it. Anytime we do something new, it feels really awkward, annoying, painful, and there's so much unpleasantness that we don't want to do it. And because of unpleasantness, resistance shows up and says, hey, there's pain here, and I'm designed to stop pain. And because you doing this thing is creating the pain, I'm going to have you stop doing this thing. But these reasons go really deep. They can go into our authority issues, our core needs, our self image, and even things such as demographics and even sex. And again, the more resistance a person has, the more difficulty they will have in trying to do things and move forward in life. And it is, in a way, unfair in some respects because there are people who have less resistance and we see them, they're in our lives. They can think about doing something and not only do it, but achieve it. Whereas the rest of us, when we think about doing something, we can barely even start. And when we do, it requires a lot of effort. And oftentimes we may not even get to the finish. And if we do, it can be draining. And it all comes down to the fact that the person who can think about doing something and achieve it, it's not because they have something special. It's because of what they don't have. And that is resistance. They don't have as much resistance. Did that make sense?
Yes, yes. As you're speaking on it, I'm picturing it, and I am picturing it as far as business is concerned, is making sales calls.
Right.
So many people know that success is on the other side. They know it 100%. There's no doubt
Yep.
about it. Success is on the other side of making sales calls and speaking with people and getting in front of as many people as you can.
Right.
However, the resistance causes people to just kind of sit at their desk and do busy work
Uh,
instead.
this is a very important point that you brought up. So, yes, when we look at most things in life, although it seems like it's difficult, especially if we've tried to done it and experienced difficulty, it's actually not that hard. When you look at business, it's really about finding customers and selling them or pitching your product. On the surface, it seems easy, but what makes it hard is all the internal stuff that's going on inside of us that says, oh no, I can't do it. It won't work for me. And when it comes to sales call, a lot of it has to do with the defense mechanism. So we all know we have a defense mechanism, right? And that defense mechanism is designed to protect us, correct? But at the most basic fundamental level, what is it protecting us from? Is it mistakes? Is it rejection? Is it death? I personally believe it comes down to pain, whether that's mental pain, physical pain, or emotional pain. And mental or physical pain is pretty obvious, getting hurt, cut, scraped, and it's obvious why the defense mechanism will want us to protect us from it. And then there's also mental pain. Mental pain comes from mental activities like thinking, learning, and problem solving. So doing certain activities like math and writing put a lot of strain on the brain. And that strain can be enough for resistance to keep us from doing it. And then there is emotional pain. Emotions are some of the most painful experiences a human can have. In fact, studies show emotional pain can be as severe as physical pain. It's kind of hard to imagine, but I think many people listening can confirm when they've had emotional pain and how painful it was. And so, the more a person is sensitive to the thoughts, judgments, actions, and reactions of others, the more pain it creates when they receive their judgments and reactions. And for a person who has a tough time making sales calls, it's because unconsciously they are a lot more, the unconscious knows that if the person doesn't get a yes, they aren't received well, it'll hurt. And that pain can be enough to create resistance, which is why some people have a very easy time doing sales calls because they're not as sensitive to the thoughts, actions, and reactions of others. Whereas that other person, even though they are an entrepreneur and want that result, it's because they're a little bit more sensitive and their brain is going, every call has a potential to experience pain. And the brain or resistance doesn't use logic or reason to see if the pain is useful or helpful, like growing pain. Remember, I talked about habits. In the beginning, when we're doing something new, it's uncomfortable. And our defense mechanism doesn't go, oh, well, it's uncomfortable now, but if we stick with it, that uncomfortability will pass. It just goes, if there is pain or potential for it, block it. And when that entrepreneur is trying to make a sales call, the brain is going, there might be a potential for this to not go well. And if it doesn't, negative feelings are going to be released. So why don't we stop doing that now and avoid that negative feelings? Now, what's really interesting about what you said regarding busy work is busy work is what I call the tricks of resistance. And what I mean by that is when resistance stops us from doing something, it doesn't tell us that it's stopping us or give us a reason. It doesn't say, hey, Rashad, you know, that call that you're trying to make, well, if it doesn't go well, it will hurt. So why don't we just, work on this paper instead? That's not what happens. Resistance manifests other ways. In fact, resistance uses all sorts of tricks to keep us from doing something, and it has all sorts of tricks up its sleeves to do so. And oftentimes, for a person, especially an entrepreneur, it manifests as busy work. And the reason I say it's a trick, busy work, is because busy work makes us feel like we're being productive. It makes us feel like we're moving the needle forward. But as long as we're not doing the thing that actually moves the needle forward, we're not making progress. And resistance and the tricks of resistance win in keeping us from doing that thing or making progress. And these tricks can manifest many ways. It can show up in over planning, where a person spends all their time in planning what to do and how to do it instead of actually doing it. Or they can go into a heightened sense of perfectionism, trying to dot all their I's and cross all their T's. And as long as they're putting all their time to make that project or art or whatever perfect, they're not putting any time to put it out there. And as long as they're not, the tricks win. And I do want to say one thing that's really important. These tricks are really cunning and sly. They're so cunning, you wouldn't think of them as tricks, which is why they work so well and why we so easily fall for them.
Wow. Wow, man. It's
I know it's this stuff is like the human mind is just when you really get into it, it's like, oh my gosh.
right, right. So what you are mentioning, the blocks that we do have are of our subconscious.
It's
Is
in our
that
subconscious. Yeah.
it's in our subconscious? Is that the reason for, let's say, affirmations or law of attraction rules?
That is what they are trying to do is trying to change our subconscious because people think the thoughts in their head is that they're actually thinking those thoughts. And people think the decisions they're making is them actually coming to the decision. When the reality is, it's actually coming from our unconscious. Our unconscious is actually putting those thoughts in our heads, and our unconscious is actually driving a lot of the decisions and actions that we're taking. And a lot of it is happening from our beliefs, our identity, our authority issues, all those things that are inside. And if we have limiting beliefs and identity and self image and all of that stuff going inside, it's going to keep us small and make things much harder than they need to be. And it'll do that by creating thoughts that m- make it seem like things are much harder. We're going to have to put a lot of effort, so we shouldn't even try. And then it's these thoughts that actually distract us. So when we're falling into busy work, it's not like we know we're falling into busy work. Our brain creates thoughts in our head going, oh, you know what? Why don't I start this or do this first? And then we'll go and we think we make the decision. So we move away from the thing that's going to move the needle. For example, the sales call, and then we get distracted. So, what's really important to understand about this concept of resistance is the voices in your head. So, let's just say this one of the challenges of being human is understanding the difference between the voices of your desire and the voices of resistance because they're both your voices. Though one is pushing you forward, while the other is holding you back, even though it's giving you the illusion that it's pushing you forward. And what's crazy is because those thoughts are in our head, we think we are thinking them. And because we think we're thinking them, we think they're true. And because we think they're true and valid, we follow them like, hey, this is a decision I made. But again, it really helps to be conscious of, hey, is this voice the voice of my resistance, or is this the voice of that's really trying to move me forward?
That's why you said the creator is evil because
Yeah.
you know, I get it now.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
I
it's
get it.
wild. So the one of the important things I want to say is, the law of attraction and affirmations, they're really important. And a lot of times people think positive thinking is the way to attract and manifest. And that is true, but we also have to change what's going on in our unconscious mind because both our conscious and our unconscious is manifesting. And if we have a lot of past challenges and limiting beliefs, self image, and limiting stories going on in our unconscious, although consciously we may think something is possible or that we are thinking positive and looking on the bright side and trying to manifest the positive, our unconscious is also manifesting. So it really helps to work through our resistance at the unconscious level because it can create challenges. And this will lead to a very important thing that I don't really get a chance to talk about. A lot of times when people are struggling, especially as an entrepreneur, it can feel like it's because of the outside world. It can feel like it's because things outside of them or externally are creating the challenge. But almost always our resistance are come internally. And one of the tricks of resistance is that it can make it seem like the challenge is external. And because it makes us seem like the challenge is external, we kind of give in a lot more easily. We think, oh, the world isn't working for us. Things are hard. It's hard to succeed. There's, things working against me that I have no control over. And once people start to accept those thoughts of resistance, they tend to feel a lot more weighed down and they give up a lot more easily. And then again, the tricks win. When we can start to understand whatever challenge that we're experiencing, even though it may seem like it's coming from the outside world, it's really a challenge that's internal, and our resistance is making it seem like it's bigger than us. When we can kind of become more aware of it and realize it's more to do with me, we're in a better position to do the necessary things to either work on ourselves or to not let that thinking stop or derail us.
You know, I'm understanding what you're saying um, because I've personally I've been through it.
Yes.
I've seen the light switch
Yes.
and was a part of that. The reason for this podcast name, Millionaire by Morning, it was first Millionaire by Monday because I used to go out over the course of the weekend and I worked at like nightclubs. And by Monday, I had a whole lot of money, right? Because I was working all weekend. So that was the name of it. But I ran into a guy one day and he owned a nightclub. And he said, I will tell you guys right now, it was me and his son. And he said, you should not have less than $100,000 a year. Like that's the bare minimum. You should not have less than $100,000 a year. And there shortly, that was the amount of money that I was making. So that's where I came up with the concept. If I can switch my mind to make six figures just like that, because I came up with a concept and I produced a product. I've always been in marketing. So I kind of came up with a concept and that's what happened. That was my minimum.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, okay. if I could think in the terms of six figures, $100,000 minimum, why can't I switch my mind to say $1 million minimum?
Yeah,
So that's been my, and I kind of want to teach people that. I want to have people like you on my show that can say, listen, man, your mind is really something that you can control in a sense. And it is, I mean, it's magical. It can do almost anything,
yeah,
but you have to know how it works.
exactly. And I love what you said about that. And I think it's really important for people to understand why coaching and mentorship is so important because and mentors who have gone through it and have succeeded in what you're trying to do can see that it's easy. They're at that place where it's like, actually, it's not that hard. And when people give them accolades and praise, it's hard for them to accept it because they're giving them praise for something to them. It's like, well, it wasn't really big of a deal. And if we're in a place where it does seem much bigger and a bigger of a deal, it is really key to be around such people as they will help us expand our mind, just like this one guy did for you. And the other piece of this is um, I was going to say something, but it lost me. If it comes back, I'll definitely chime it in because it was extremely important.
Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's jump into your books.
Sure.
And the books, I see you have a couple of them behind you. And are all of your books based on, I know one is speed reading. Um, I think the other one is the internal resistance, but are they all based on the mind?
Yes. So, as you had introduced me, I am an author in the area of mental, physical, and emotional performance. And I started off at books and topics such as memory, concentration, mind mapping, and speed reading. And that's where the mental performance piece comes in, as I was fascinated by that part. That's what really kind of got me jazzed up when I was learning and talking about. And then as I was growing and evolving and wanted to attend to other aspects such as diet and health, I wrote about that as well. And I had mentioned I have a technique that helps people go into their unconscious and it works on the emotional level because I realized that's really important too. So to just backtrack a little bit, as far as my books, I started off with it being more mind and mental related and have veered more into the physical as well as the emotional.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And these are all self-published.
Hmm.
They all located on Amazon, Amazon Kindle.
Yep. People can just go to Amazon, type in my name that they see on the screen, Kam Knight, KamKnight, and they'll see all my books pop up. And right now, I have about 10,000 ratings on Amazon across all my books.
And with these books, do you currently have a program, that a course or anything that you're coaching on or coaching with these books?
Yeah. So, again, my book started off as mental performance or dealing with the mind because that's what fascinated me at that time. But then, after my 10th book, which was concentration, I started coming to this concept of internal resistance. And that's when really this internal resistance idea started to get seeded and began blooming. And it was really based on a chapter that I talked about in that book. And now I have a course called Conquer Internal Resistance to Achieve Your Next Goal. It's a really deep dive into this topic that we're discussing. And it goes into our wants because the wants is the best place to start when we're working through resistance because our own wants can be a hindrance to achieving them. It may seem hard to believe, but our own wants create a challenge in going after the want. And then it talks about resistance and talks about over a dozen criterias the brain uses to decide if we should or not do something. And then it goes into dozens and dozens of tricks. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of tricks our brain has up its sleeve to keep us from doing things. But more importantly, it also provides a very linear and thought out method of how to move past resistance. So we can make forward moving action less of a strain. And in fact, instead of fighting against our mind to do it, we can reprogram our mind so it's motivating us to do it. Very different things.
Very different. I have, you just made me think of something. Alcohol.
Yeah.
So if there's that same sales guy that's afraid to make those sales calls, just deathly afraid to do it, that guy that goes in the bar and is deathly afraid to talk to the girl, if they were to have a shot or two of alcohol, the resistance goes away. And now they can make the sales calls, they can talk to the girl.
All
So,
right.
what is that about? Can you speak on? You may have to add this as a chapter.
So this is really good, and I'm gonna say it's phenomenal question. I don't get it at all. This is the first time I'm getting it, but there's a lot going on. So we've heard alcohol be called liquid courage.
Yeah.
Though alcohol, just like that one guy that we see who can think about doing something and take action and achieve it, it's not because what that guy has. And as a result, it's not what alcohol is giving you. So it's not giving you courage. It is reducing our resistance. It is reducing our discriminator, which is why it does become easier to do things that seem so almost impossible. In fact, I remember one thing I didn't mention is I have traveled to over 100 countries. And in my journey, I have picked up a language or two. And I remember when I was learning a language such as Spanish, and when I was doing it consciously and learning the words and then trying to speak the words and in a way where it matched the structure of how it should be spoken, there was a lot of uhs and ums and stuff going on. But I also remember, and you can, many people will confirm this, when we would go out to a bar, have a few drinks, the language would just come out so easily.
Yeah.
Like we could talk so fluently. And many people will confirm this because they have had the same experience. It's like you wouldn't even think you knew the language prior to it. But once you're drinking, you're surprised at how much you can even understand the other person as much as you can speak back to the other person. And again, it comes down to the the alcohol is actually reducing or masking the resistance so we can kind of operate in our full self. And this
Wow.
is something really important for people to understand. Although when they think about doing something and their brain says, "Oh, this is going to be hard. I can't imagine being able to do this," or I could never succeed or it won't work. Know that that is just resistance. And when we look at the brain in of itself, there's only a 0.1% difference between you and everyone else. And that 0.1% difference doesn't necessarily manifest in mental abilities, it manifests in physical characteristics, such as skin tone, hair color, height, weight, and stuff like that. So, more or less, we all have similar potential, and it's very high potential to operate on a high level, whether that's mentally, physically, and emotionally. Now, what makes one person be able to do it more and better and faster, it all comes down to the level of resistance they have. It goes back to that analogy that one guy who can have a want and act on it and achieve it is not because he has something special, it's not because he's talented or gifted, he just has less resistance. And if a person can understand that, they can understand that it's actually not about the mental abilities or skills or their childhood or whether their parents were affluent or not. It has nothing to do with that. It's just that you just have more resistance to work through. And if you can work through it, um, you can operate just as well, if not better, than the people that we think are operating at a high level. Now, there is one caveat to this. I don't want people to go out and start drinking because I said this, because alcohol isn't the way to help remove resistance. There are better ways. As I mentioned, I developed a technique that actually helps remove and reduce a lot of it, where you don't need alcohol for it. It just goes away, and not for short term, but permanently. So we can become more of that person or guy that can think about doing something and take action. In fact, it becomes almost magic and simultaneously. Now, if a person does want a crutch, there are ways to reduce resistance that doesn't rely on drugs and things that can become dangerously addictive and dependent. And that is taking things like chamomile, lavender, passiflora, things that calm and relax us. Because alcohol calms and relaxes us because it reduces the resistance. And herbs such as passiflora, chamomile tea, lavender also have a calming effect, and that calming can also reduce resistance. And what I would recommend is a person seep some of that tea in the morning and drink it, and they'll find they can move through the day so much better and so much easily. Or they can drink the chamomile stuff, the stuff that's a little bit stronger that helps you sleep at night. And once they get into the habit of it, they'll wake up in the mornings less on edge and less kind of having that resistive wall there.
Wow, that's good, man. This is a good conversation.
Thank
Where,
you.
if anyone wants to follow you, where do they follow you on your social medias?
All right. So, how I end these podcasts is by saying anyone who listened to us up to this point is going to get three free gifts. The first gift is called Prompt Engineering for Your Mind. The human brain was the original ChatGPT, and we can prompt it to not only give us answers and solutions, but act on those answers and solutions. And that's the first guide. The second guide is build skills and habits in your sleep. So we kind of alluded to programming our unconscious mind, and there's an easy way to do that to build skills and habits that allow us to have the success without ever getting up off the couch, or and in fact even laying down we can do it. And the second guide will teach that. The third guy goes deeper into this topic of internal resistance and talks about our wants, and talks about how our own wants can create challenges. It goes into some of the reasons for resistance, as well as talks about some of the tricks of resistance. And they can get all three guides on my website at kamknight.com. They can also learn about my course, Conquer Internal Resistance to Achieve Your Next Goal. That's also on my website. And then if anybody wants to do one-on-one work with me, they, with that technique, and I want to say it's not hypnosis or it's not NLP. The person is conscious the whole time, and they get to see what's inside their unconscious. And we get to work through and remove a lot of those challenges that last not just for a short time, but for an extended period. And they can email me at mentor@kamknight.com.
That's great. That's great. Anyone that's out there that's listening, this has been a great show, and I would definitely give Kam Knight, and that's Cam KamKnight.com.
Yeah.
I would definitely give him a follow and get those freebies that he's giving away, and definitely check out some of the podcasts that he's been doing and his YouTube channel as well. Cam, I want to thank you for coming on today. This has been a great episode.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to talk to your audience. I hope people have enjoyed it as much as it sounds like you did. It's a fascinating topic, and the brain is just fascinatingly complex. So if you want to learn more, definitely reach out to me.
All right. And for anyone out there listening, continue to Make moves, make money, and make meaningful memories. Until next time.